And welcome back to the Mole Valley Maker channel. This video is about the turning of my first segmented bowl, which was part of the hashtag segment segment month March challenge issued by Leo and Heather. Links down in the description to their channels. The reason I put off making a segmented piece for so long is that when you watch all the videos for segment turned items, they usually involve a table saw, which I don't own. So in order to cut my segments, I had to do my best and use a fairly inexpensive miter saw. The process I used for this was roughly set it up to the angle that was required, test cut some pieces of scrap timber, put them together as a dry fit, and then see whether I needed to knock the angle left or right a little bit to try and make a full circle. This was partially successful, involved some measurements, involved a little bit of calculations, but it also involved me gluing up the circles into halves because I was unable to get the angle sufficiently close and the glue ups are sufficiently accurate in order to maintain a full circle. Throughout this entire process, I have to say I didn't enjoy it until I got to the turning. So I may well do another segmented piece in the future. I haven't completely ruled it out. It is just quite a time-consuming process, and I think without a table saw, I think it is quite difficult to get it very accurate. I didn't make it very easy because I chose so many small pieces of oak offcut that I had in a box that I nicked from a carpenter joiner friend of mine. So I know I didn't make it particularly easy, but having said that, I am really pleased with the result, and you can see all the turning. I will move on to that next. I start the turning by cutting a second mortise on the inside of the bowl so that I can mount the bowl on that mortise and then flip it around and tidy up the back. Here I'm using a 6mm skew chisel to cut the dovetail on the inside of what's probably about a 2.5mm mortise. Here I've mounted the bowl in reverse around the other way, and I'm putting a dovetail on the mortise on the underside, whereas before it was just cut with a 4s and a bit, so it had straight sides. This will just enable me to give a slightly better grip when it's flipped back round again when I'm hollowing out the inside. The base of the bowl is a piece of sapele. The 3 segment rings are oak, but the biggest ring, I got my calculations wrong and is actually too big. It would only overlapped by a few millimeters with the second ring. So there is a piece of plywood, laser ply, to basically act as a 4th ring to take up that space. I'm stopping quite often just to check how my cutting's going, to have a look, check for holes, cracks, anywhere the glue hasn't taken properly, and also how much more I've got to take off in order to get a circle rather than the straight edges of the segments. I've switched from my 1/2 inch bowl gouge into a 3/8 spindle gouge, but with a much sharper a 30-degree angle bevel rather than a 45-degree I've got on most of my bowl gouges. Also, because it's a spindle gouge, the flute is narrower. The flute is wider, shall we say. It's not a parabolic, it's more of a circular flute. And you can hear, I stopped the lathe and could see that I hadn't quite got the first ring down to round. So quite a deeper cut there. And I've very nearly got it down to round, but not quite. I've decided here that I'll round off the top ring, coming at it from the other side, which will then give me an idea how much of the plywood I can take off. The segmented rings did very much end up oval because of the way I glued them up in halves and then sanded the two halves flat so they glued together squarely. That meant I had to be a little bit careful the way I glued it up. It was an interesting experience, and I say I'm sure much easier with a table saw. A table saw with a crosscut sled design for cutting segments. If you're not sure what I mean by that, then just search for the hashtag segmentmm and you'll see other videos where it's all carried out. Here I'm using the spindle gouge again to really try and expose some of the oak from the underside. And also make sure that there's some kind of round transition rather than it being a set of angles. Again, first time I've done this, so it was all very much a question of just trying it and see. There I've detected there's a bit of a flat. Going in with the wing of the tool just to try and round it off. I'm happy with that, and then it's just a question of sanding it and sealing it. sanded it, sealed it and waxed it on the underside. Now I'm back round to where you saw it the very first time, and now I'm starting to hollow out the inside, starting off by flattening on the topmost ring, flattening off the topmost ring, nibbling away at the plywood to reveal the second oak ring. Again, a fair amount of stopping, having a look, making sure I'm not going to cut something vital out and the whole thing fall to pieces. And also trying to feel from the outside and the inside at the same time to make sure there's something approaching a consistent thickness. Not something I'm overly concerned about. I'm just trying to get it to look pleasing and to be effectively round everywhere to make sure all the flats on the segments have gone. It's around this point I was really starting to actually like the effect I was getting, even down to the point of liking the sort of the effect of the plywood, giving it 3 layers, and also really appreciating that there was very little, if any, end grain. The only end grain was really on the sapele base. All the oak is effectively side grain, meaning it cuts really nicely. And now it's just a question of getting a nice bowl shape into the sapele at the bottom, making sure the transition is nice and smooth. So I'm giving you a thumbs up, I'm happy with that. Sanded from I think 80 grit through to 320 I think, using some sanding sealer now, which gives you a glimpse of what I think is a reasonably pleasing effect. Give that a matter of minutes to dry, and then it's straight in with the Yorkshire grit. For those of you who aren't wood turners and don't know, Yorkshire grit is an abrasive paste. It will effectively take the finish to about 1,000, the equivalent of 1,000 grit sandpaper. It's a mixture of oil, wax, and a fine abrasive stone. I forget exactly what the stone is called. But the stone effectively, it's a soft stone and therefore breaks down as you buff it. So I'm starting off at a slow speed around 250 RPM and then gradually building up, moving across from folding the paper over, finding a clean section, and then buffing it again, speeding up a bit more, and keep repeating that process until the paper comes away clean, which means that all the Yorkshire grit has been removed and you're left with a very smooth finish suitable for the polish of your choice. And then just quickly hand buff it to make sure there's nothing stuck in the grain. And then I'm going to use a bit of Hampshire Sheen High Gloss wax. And this is exactly the same process I used on the underside, I just didn't show the underside. So that's effectively the bowl finished, and I've just flipped it around in some of my small remounting jaws, and I'm just going to cut the mortise out. This is a process that wood turners undergo to make sure that when other wood turners pick up their bowls at craft fairs, it appears finished on the bottom. I'm a little bit worried at this point about the sound, as it feels like it's quite hollow and quite close, and I'm aware that in the centre is a divot caused by the Forstner bit, and I decide that I'm not going to completely cut that out. I will leave it in place. I leave a slight you can see there's just a ring there as well, so that's kind of left as a little bit of decoration stroke interest. When it was off the lathe, and I was able to kind of feel the thickness on the bottom. I think it sounds a lot worse on the video than it actually is. I think there's still a few good 4 or 5 mil there. I've decided there's still a little bit of a ridge there, so I move over to a Simon Hope box hollower. It's a negative rake box scraper. It's a negative rake scraper. Freshly home with a diamond file, and just quite nice for finishing off, taking very, very light cuts. And that's left a really nice finish. I've noticed there's a little bit of wax build up, so I think I go back and decide I'm just going to take one final pass, one last cut, as the woodturners say, going through the bottom. I'm just extending the cut out a little bit further. Final pass with the scraper, and then sand and finish in the same manner as you saw. And then to end, I'm going to show you just some beauty shots. I'd like to thank Leo and Heather for issuing this challenge and getting me to actually make a segmented piece. I didn't enjoy the process to begin with. I enjoyed it much more, and the finish article I think made it very worthwhile after I'd sort of turned it, finished it. So I probably will have a go. In fact, I picked up some offcuts of Meranti today that I may well do something similar with. So as ever, thanks for watching.